The sixth point, the divine name of self-subsistent. This point discusses the divine name of self-subsistent. It's a summary of the fifth point about the name of ever-living, is an addendum to Nur Çeşmesi, the fountainhead of light, and is also considered appropriate to be an addendum to the 30th word. An apology. These important matters concerning the profound, comprehensive greatest manifestation of the name of self-subsistent occurred to me as separate flashes and are therefore not well arranged. They have moreover remained in the form of an ill-arranged, speedily written uncorrected rough copy. For these reasons, many deficiencies and much disorderliness are bound to be apparent in the phraseology and manner of expression. You must forgive my defects for the sake of the beauties of the matters discussed. A reminder: the points concerning the greatest name are comprehensive to the utmost degree and also extremely profound, especially the matters concerned with the name of self-subsistent, as are those of the first ray in particular. Note: if the person reading this treatise does not have a knowledge of science, he should not begin with the first ray, but with the second, and should read the first at the end. Furthermore, since these latter look to the materialists and have penetrated the subject to an even greater degree, everyone will not be able to understand every matter in all its aspects. They will, however, be able to grasp a part of each matter. According to the rule of, a thing should not be abandoned completely even if it is not wholly obtained. It is not reasonable to leave aside such a matter altogether, saying, I cannot pick all the fruits in this immaterial garden. Whatever the amount of fruit a person can pick, it will be of benefit. For just as the matters connected with the greatest name are extensive to a degree beyond comprehension, so are they also subtle to the degree the mind cannot distinguish them. Not everyone's mind will reach the fifth and sixth points concerning the names of ever-living and self-subsistent, in particular the allusions of life to the pillars of belief, and particularly to the pillar of divine determining and decree in the fifth point, but they will not remain without some share of them, and in any event these matters will strengthen their belief. The importance of strengthening belief, the key to eternal happiness, is truly tremendous. Even an ioda's increase is a treasure. Imam Rabbani Ahmed al-Faruqi said, in my view, increase in only a small aspect of belief is preferable to hundreds of illuminations and spiritual delights. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, in whose hand is the dominion of all things. To him belong the keys of the heavens and the earth, and there is nothing but with us are its treasuries. There is not a moving creature but he has grasp of its forelock. Imparted to my mind during the month of Zilkada was a point concerning verses like this that allude to divine self-subsistence, a greatest manifestation of the name of self-subsistence, which is either the greatest name or the second of the two lights of the greatest name or the sixth of its six lights. My situation in a austere prison does not allow me to explain that greatest light fully. However, Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, expounded the greatest name in his ode Er-Züce under the exalted name of Sekina, and in his ode Celceletüye he considered these six names contained within the greatest name together with some other sublime names, and said they were the greatest and most important. I have received extraordinary consolation from his discussion of them, and so, similarly to the preceding 5 names, we shall allude to the name of self-subsistence, to that greatest light, with 5 rays in what is at the very least an abbreviated form. First ray. The universe's glorious creature is self-subsistent, that is, he subsists, continues, and endures of himself. All things subsist and continue through him, they remain in existence and have permanence. If the relationship of self-subsistence were cut off from the universe for even the fraction of a second, the universe would be annihilated. Furthermore, As the Qur'an of mighty stature decrees, together with the all-glorious one's self-substance, there is nothing that is like unto him. That is, he has no like, equal, peer, or partner in either his essence, or his attributes, or his actions. Indeed, it is not possible for the most pure and holy one who holds the universe with its circumstances and functions in the grasp of his dominicality and regulates, administers, sustains, and nurtures it with perfect order as though it were a house or a palace to have any like, equal, partner, or peer. It is impossible. Yes, it is indeed impossible that the all-glorious ever-living and self-subsistent one, for whom the creation of the stars is as easy as that of particles, to whose power the greatest thing is subjugated as is the most minute, for whom nothing is an obstacle to any other thing, and no action obstructs any other action, in whose view innumerable individuals are present in the same way that a single individual is present, who hears all voices simultaneously and is able to answer the limitless needs of all simultaneously, outside the sphere of whose will and volition is nothing, no state, as is testified to by the order and balance of the beings in the universe, who, although he is in no place, is present everywhere through his power and knowledge, and although everything is utterly distant from him, is utterly close to him, that he should have any like, equal, partner, deputy, opposite, or peer is not possible. It is impossible. His sacred qualities and attributes can be considered only through allegory and comparison. All the comparisons and allegories in the Risale-i Nur are of this sort. Yes, the most pure and holy one is without like, necessarily extant, utterly removed from matter and beyond space. His fragmentation and division are impossible in every respect, as is any sort of change or alteration. His being needy or impotent is beyond the bounds of possibility. And yet, a group of the people of misguidance suppose certain manifestations of the most pure and holy essence which are manifested in the pages of the universe and in the levels of beings to be the most pure and holy one himself, and ascribe the degrees of the divinity to certain creatures. They attribute some of the all-glorious one's works to nature. However, it is demonstrated with conclusive proofs in numerous places in the Risale-i Nur that nature is a divine art and cannot be the artist. It is a dominical book and cannot be the scribe. It is an embroidery and cannot be the embroiderer. It is a register and cannot be the accountant. It is a law and cannot be the power. It is a pattern and cannot be the source. It is a recipient and is passive and cannot be the author. It is an order and cannot the orderer. It is a code of creation and cannot be the establisher of the code. If, to suppose the impossible, the tiniest animate creature was referred to nature and it was told, "You made this," as is demonstrated in many places in the Risale-i Nur with decisive proofs, it would be necessary to provide molds, or rather machines, to the number of the tiny creature's members and bodily systems, so that nature could carry out the work. Moreover, although a group of the people of misguidance called materialists pursued a greatest manifestation of divine creativity and dominical power within the orderly transformations of minute particles, since they did not know from where the manifestation came and could not understand from where that universal force was being directed, which originated from the manifestation of the eternally besought one's power, they supposed matter and force were pre-eternal and began to attribute the divine works to particles and their motion. Glory be to God! Could human beings be so ignorant as to attribute actions and works that can only be carried out by one who is both beyond space and present in such a way as to see, know, and direct all things in the creation of all things everywhere, to particles and their motion, which are tossed around in the storms of lifeless, blind, unconscious chance that lacks will and balance? Anyone who possesses even a jot of intelligence must see just what an ignorant and superstitious idea this is. Indeed, because those wretches have abandoned absolute unity, they have fallen into a limitless, endless absolute multiplicity. That is, since they do not accept one single God, they are compelled to accept endless gods. Which means that since they are unable to squeeze into their corrupted minds the idea of one single most pure and whole essence and the pure eternity and creativity that are necessary and essential to Him, they are compelled by their opinions to accept the pure eternity, indeed the divinity of those limitless, endless, lifeless particles. So, come and consider this complete and utter ignorance. For certainly, the manifestation on particles has made that mass of particles into an orderly and magnificent army through the strength, power, and command of the necessarily existent one. If the commander-in-chief's command and power were withdrawn even for a second, that numerous, lifeless, unconscious mass would degenerate into irregular soldiers. It would altogether cease to exist. Furthermore, it is as if another group of people see even further, that is, they are even more ignorantly misguided. They imagine the matter known as ether, which is an extremely subtle, fine, obedient, and subjugated page of the glorious Maker's activities, a means for the transmitting of His commands, a flimsy veil for the exercise of His power, a refined ink for His writing, a fine raiment for His creating, a leaven of His artifacts, and a tillage for His seeds, to be the origin and the author because it acts as a mirror to the manifestation of His dominicality. This extraordinary ignorance requires endless impossibilities because ether is matter that is unconscious, lifeless, and without will, and is finer than the matter of which particles consist, which drones the materialists, and is denser than the index of primordial matter into which the ancient philosophers thrust themselves. To attribute to this matter, which may be fragmented and divided without limits, and is equipped with the qualities and duties of being passive and the ability to transmit, to attribute to its minute particles, which are far minuter than particles of other matter, the actions and works that exist through a will and power that sees, knows, and directs all things in all things is mistaken to the number of particles of ether. The act of creation apparent in beings is such that it demonstrates its proceeds from a power and will which sees and knows most things, the whole universe even, in each thing particularly if it is animate, and which recognizes and secures the animate creature's relationship with the universe. It thus demonstrates that it cannot be the act of causes, which are material and are not all-encompassing. Through the meaning of self-substance, a particular creative act bears a mighty meaning that points to its being directly the act of the creator of the universe. For example, an act pertaining to the creation of a bee demonstrates that it is peculiar to the creator of the universe in two respects. First respect, the fact that all the other bees throughout the world resembling that particular bee manifest the same act at the same time demonstrates that the particular and individual act is the tip of a comprehensive act which embraces the face of the earth. In which case, whoever the author and owner of that vast act is, he must be the author of the particular act. Second respect, in order to be the author of the action directed towards the creation of the bee in question, a power and will are necessary that are vast enough to know and secure the conditions for the life of the bee and its members and its relationship with the universe. Therefore, the one who performs the particular action can only perform it thus perfectly by having authority over most of the universe. Hence, the most particular and insignificant action demonstrates in two respects that it is peculiar to the creator of all things. The most remarkable and surprising thing is this: the necessarily existent one possesses necessity, which is the firmest level of existence, absolute isolation from matter, which is the most immutable degree of existence, absolute freedom from space, which is the state of existence furthest from cessation, and unity, which is the soundest quality of existence and the one remotest from change and non-existence. And yet, they attribute pure eternity and everlastingness, which are the necessarily existent one's most particular qualities, and are necessary and essential to him, to things like ether and particles, which are matter that is material, unbounded, and numerous, is the least stable level of existence and the least tangible, the most changing, and the most varying, and the most dispersed through space. They ascribe pure eternity to them and fancy them to be pure eternal, and some of them even suppose that it is out of them that the divine works arise. It has been demonstrated through cogent arguments in many places in the Risale-i Nur how contrary to truth and reality, how unreasonable and absurd is this idea. Second ray. This consists of two matters. First matter. Neither sleep overcomes him nor slumber. There is not a moving creature but he has grasp of its forelock. To him belong the keys of the heavens and the earth. These verses point to a greatest manifestation of the name of self-substance. One aspect of the mighty truth that this and verses like them indicate is as follows. The existence, continuance, and perpetuation of the heavenly bodies in the universe are tied to the mystery of self-substance. If the manifestation of self-substance were to avert its face for a moment, millions of globes, some of them 1,000 times larger than the earth, would be scattered into the infinite void of space and colliding with one another would crash into nothingness. For example, the power of the self-substance of the one who keeps thousands of stately palaces in place in perfect order and makes them travel like aircraft through space is measured through the stability, order, and continuance of those palaces in space. So too, a measure of the greatest manifestation of the name of self-substance are the facts that the all-glorious and self-subsistent one bestows on the innumerable heavenly bodies within ethereal matter as stability, permanence, and continuance within the utmost order and balance through the mystery of self-substance, and together with upholding without prop or support in the void millions of mighty globes, some 1,000 and some even 1,000,000 times larger than the earth, entrusts them all with duties and causes them to submit in perfect obedience like a majestic army to the decrees proceeding from the command of be, and it is. The particles of all beings also exist, like the stars, through the mystery of self-substance, and are permanent and continue through it. The particles in an animate creature's body do not disperse, but are assembled in groups and systems peculiar to each limb, and without scattering, preserve their position within the storms of the elements, which flow like floods, and remain regular and in order. Since this self-evidently does not occur through themselves, but through the mystery of self-substance, and since each body is like a disciplined regiment, and each species like a regular army, these particles proclaim the mystery of self-substance with innumerable tongues in the same way that the continuance and motion of animate creatures and their assemblages on the earth and that of the stars in the world of space proclaim it. Second matter. This station requires that some of the benefits and instances of wisdom in things connected with the mystery of self-substance are pointed out. The wisdom in the existence of things and the aims of their natures, the benefits in their creation, and the results of their lives are of three sorts. The first sort looks to each thing itself and to man and to man's affairs. The second sort is more important. It is the meanings of all things being set out for innumerable readers, for each is a sign, a missive, a book, an oath for conscious beings to study, an indication making known the manifestation of the glorious creature's names. The third sort. This concerns the glorious Maker and looks to him. While one of the benefits and results of things look to the things themselves, countless look to the glorious Maker. For the glorious Maker beholds the wonders of his art himself. He observes the manifestation of his names in the beings which he himself has fashioned. In regard to this mighty third sword, it is sufficient if beings live only for a second. Another mystery of self-substance that requires the existence of all things will be explained in the third ray. At one time, I was investigating the talisman of the universe and riddle of creation, which lies in its being a manifestation, together with the instances of wisdom and benefits in beings, and I asked, I wonder why did things display themselves in this way, then swiftly vanish and are lost? I look at their individual features. They have been attired, decked out, and adorned in an orderly, purposeful fashion and sent to this display, an exhibition. But then they disappear in a day or two, and some of them within a few minutes, uselessly and in vain they vanish. What is the purpose in their being, seen by us for this brief time? I was most curious. Then, through divine favor, I discovered an important instance of wisdom in the fact that beings, in particular animate beings, come into the place of instruction that is this world. It was as follows. Each being, and especially if it is animate, is an extremely meaningful word, missive, dominical oath, and divine proclamation. After it has been studied by intelligent beings and has stated its meaning to innumerable readers, its corporeal form, which is like a letter or a word, disappears. For about a year, this instance of wisdom was sufficient for me. Then, the truly wonderful and subtle miracles of art to be found in creatures, in particular in animate beings, were disclosed. I understood that these subtleties of art, which are so fine and wonderful, are not only to set forth meanings for the gazes of intelligent beings. For, although innumerable such creatures may study each being, their studying is both limited, and not all of them will be able to penetrate all the subtleties of art in those animate beings. That is to say, the most important results of the creation of animate beings and the most significant purpose of their natures is to present to be eternal self-subsistent one's own gaze the marvels of his art and the compassionate gifts and bounties he has bestowed. As for this purpose, it satisfied me for a long time, and from it I understood the following. The wisdom and purpose of creation, which is to present the endless subtleties of art in beings, particularly in animate beings, to the gaze of the pure eternal self-subsistent one, that is, for he himself to behold his own art, was sufficient for that vast outlay. Some time later, I realized that the subtleties of art in the individual features and forms of beings did not continue. They were being renewed and were undergoing change at great speed. They were being transformed within an endless activity and creativity. I started to ponder over it, saying, the wisdom in this creativity and activity must necessarily be as extensive as the activity itself. Then, the two instances of wisdom mentioned above began to seem insufficient. They lacked something. With extreme curiosity, I began to search and seek for a further purpose and instance of wisdom. All praise be to God, through the effulgence of the Qur'an of miraculous exposition, after some time a vast, limitless wisdom and purpose became apparent at the level of the mystery of self-substance. And through it, the divine mystery called the talisman of the universe and riddle of creation was understood. It is explained in detail in the 24th letter, so here in the third ray we shall briefly mention only 2 or 3 points. Look, from this point to the manifestation of the mystery of self-substance, it has blocked all beings out of non-existence, and according to the meaning of the verse, it is God who has raised the heavens without any supports that you can see, has caused each one of them to remain in infinite space. It has bestowed stability and permanence on them and caused them all to display the manifestation of the mystery of self-substance. If not for this support, nothing at all could continue to exist of its own accord. Everything would topple over into the infinite voids and tumble into non-existence. Furthermore, just as all beings rely on the all-glorious self-substance One for their existence, stability, and permanence, they continue in existence through Him, so, according to the meaning of the verse, and to Him goes back every affair. The tips of thousands of chains or lines in the states and conditions of beings are fastened to the mystery of self-substance, which, if the comparison is not mistaken, is like the center or central pole of telephone and telegraph lines. If they did not rely on that luminous point of support, thousands of unending sequences of causes would be necessary, which according to scholars is an impossible and false notion. In fact, there would have to be as many of these absurd unending sequences of causes as there are beings. For example, one thing, protection or light or existence or sustenance, for instance, in one respect relies on the next thing, and that on the next, and that on the next, until finally, since it cannot be infinite, it has to come to an end. Thus, the end of all such lines and sequences lies in the mystery of self-substance. But when this mystery has been understood, the links and the meaning of each thing relying on the next in those imaginary sequences do not remain, they disappear, and everything is seen to look directly to the mystery of self-substance. Third ray. By means of one or two introductory points, we shall point out to a small degree the disclosure of the mystery of self-substance within divine creativity and dominical activity, which verses like the following allude to. Every day He manifests Himself in yet another way, a sovereign doer of whatever He wills. He creates whatever He wishes, in whose hand is the dominion of all things. So, look to the signs of God's mercy, how He restores the earth to life after its death. The first, when we look at the universe, we see that one group of creatures which are tossed around in the flood of time and follow on one after the other convoy after convoy, come for a second and then immediately vanish. Another group comes for a minute and then passes on. One species stops by in the manifest world for an hour, then enters the world of the unseen. Some of them come and alight in the manifest world for a day, some of them for a year, some for a century, and some for an age. They perform their duties and then depart. This astonishing traveling and passage of beings and flow and flux of creatures is driven and directed with such order, balance, and wisdom, and the one who commands them and those convoys does so with such insight, purpose, and planning that even if all minds were to unite and become one mind, it would be unable to comprehend the essence of this mind's direction, it would be unable to find and found in it, and so could not criticize it. Thus, within this dominical activity, not allowing any of those pleasing creatures that it loves, especially animate creatures, to open their eyes, the pen of divine determining and decree dispatches them to the world of the unseen, not permitting them even to draw a breath. It discharges them from the life of this world. It continuously fills the guest house of the world and empties it without the guest's consent, making the globe of the earth like a slate for writing and erasing through the manifestation of. He grants life and deals death. The pen of divine determining and decree ceaselessly inscribes writings on it and renews and replaces them. One meaning of the wisdom in this dominical activity and divine creativity and a fundamental requirement and emotive cause of them is a limitless, endless instance of wisdom that may be divided into three important branches. The first branch of that wisdom is this: every sort of activity, whether particular or universal, yields pleasure. There is a pleasure in all activity. Indeed, activity is pure pleasure. Yes, activity is the manifestation of existence, which is pure pleasure, and is the shaking off and becoming distant from non-existence, which is pure suffering. Everyone with ability follows with pleasure the unfolding of his ability through activity. The revealing of innate talents through activity arises from a pleasure and results in a pleasure. Everyone who possesses some perfections follows with pleasure their disclosure through activity. Since there is present in every activity a perfection and pleasure which is thus loved and sought after, and activity too is a perfection, and since there are apparent in the world of animate creatures the manifestations of a boundless love and infinite compassion which arise from a perpetual and eternal life, those manifestations show that as the requirements of that eternal life, which is fitting for the necessary existence of the one who thus loves and is compassionate and makes himself loved and is worthy of his holiness, there are, if the terms are not mistaken, at the utmost level such sacred qualities in that most pure and holy life as divine passion, hallowed love, and sheer pleasure. And it is these qualities that continuously renew, agitate, and change the universe through endless activity and infinite creativity. The second branch of the wisdom in the limitless divine activity, which looks to the mystery of self-substance. This looks to the divine names. It is well known that everyone who possesses beauty wants to both see and display his beauty, that everyone who possesses some skills desires and loves to attract attention to his skills by exhibiting and proclaiming them. He desires and loves his skill, which is a beautiful truth and meaning that has remained concealed, to be revealed and to find ardent admirers. These fundamental rules are enforced in all things according to the degree of each. According to the testimony of the universe and the evidence of the manifestations and embroideries of the thousands and one most beautiful names of the all-glorious self-subsistent one who possesses absolute beauty, there are in every degree of each of those names a true loveliness, a true perfection, a true beauty, and a most exquisite truth. Indeed, in every degree there are endless different sorts of loveliness and innumerable beautiful truths. Since the beings of the universe are mirrors reflecting the sacred beauties of those names, and the tableaus displaying their beautiful embroideries, and the pages setting forth their beautiful truths, those constant and eternal names will entirely and unceasingly renew and change the universe through their manifestations as a consequence of that sacred divine love and due to the mystery of self-substance. In this way, they will display their endless manifestations and infinite, meaningful embroideries and books both to the witnessing gaze of the all-glorious self-subsistent one, whom they signify, and to the studying gaze of uncountable numbers of intelligent creatures and creatures endowed with spirits, and will display countless tableaus out of a finite and limited thing, and numerous individuals out of a single individual, and multiple truths out of a single truth.